let's transition then here. So do you have something you can read for us tonight?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know whether you would want that, so I'll just have to think of something right now. Would you like a short story, or would you like an excerpt from the novel Reciprocity?
Whatever you like. I'm good with both. Full disclosure for our audience here. I love listening to you read things. Like one of the highlights of the short story America conferences is whenever you're reading, like I love it. But just brilliant, classical, just way to read it and then also bring out the emotions of it.
Thank you.
And
Wow.
and then when they're it was really touching this last time you had read one, and I'm not going to ask you to read the specific story if you don't want to, but you had read a short story from Reading from Eisenhower and you had choked up on it.
Oh, I lost it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, completely. I'd never done that in a reading before. I should have seen it coming because I had not read that story before out loud,
Mhm.
and I did
Sure.
not expect what happened, but I lost it. I mean, um, because I noticed that you got a little choked up when you gave your reading, which was so great, and I was like, yeah, but I won't. I mean, this story is a little bit of a risk. It was a little bit of a risk for me, but I did not think I would completely lose it. I lost it the way that I did at my dad's funeral.
Sure.
When I was eulogizing my father, I got near the end and I couldn't finish.
Sure.
And where it's just uncontrollable emotion. Yeah.
Right.
Um, well, let's see. I will. One that I read a lot at bookstore signings and whatnot, homeowners associations, all of that kind of thing, is The Guest, from my first collection,
Okay.
from Friday Afternoon and Other Stories. Um, it's the right length to go from start to finish, but it's not Flash. And obviously, you can go start to finish with Flash, and the Flash was
Sure.
what I read at Short Story America. Um, but it's been a popular one at events. So
Sure.
I'll read The Guest.
That would
Okay.
be perfect.
Let me look it up. And I don't have page numbers memorized or anything like that.
Right. So while you look it up too, here I'll show because I have my latest edition, Short Story America. I guess on there. So um as a reminder for the audience, so all of this is free. The whole goal of this show is twofold. I want you guys to find the next author, right? Like not just your next read, your next author, next author you're gonna love. And then also just get a chance to like really experience the work. So I love like bringing people on and like reading like this is
That's
like
great.
kid in the candy store for me. So I'm super excited, for it. And check out Short Story America as well, but check out all of Tim's work. It's super, all of it's worth it. I can't give it enough of a plug.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the novel Reciprocity is a crime thriller. At Short Story America and at the reception, I read the first chapter
Sure.
from the novel. But you got to tell backstory, and you have to set it up.
Sure.
And So I hope people in your audience will want to pick up a copy of Reciprocity. It's on Amazon, but you also can also come to my website if you want a signed copy of any of my books. Those are all available through my website at tdjohnston.com. Just a little shameless plug there.
No, and I'll include links for all of it too.
Great.
So
That's great.
yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
But this story is from my collection, Friday Afternoon and Other Stories. And this story is called The Guest. The answering machine down the hall in the kitchen clicked on after the fourth ring. Carl stared warily at the portable phone atop the dust blanketed printer, ready to answer. Maybe. if the caller wasn't from the home office. He waited for Rachel's tired voice to finish the greeting. The machine beeped. Carl, it's me. Her voice wafted from the kitchen, attractive but irritating in its I know what you're doing kind of way. Pick up, honey. It's about dinner. Carl heaved himself out of his black swivel desk chair, sighed heavily, and picked up the portable. Hey, Ray, he breathed. Just getting some work out of the way. What's up? The silence at the other end made Carl certain that she somehow knew of his mornings spent with TV Land and the Superstation. But he really had been working since lunch. He really had. Carl, you mind if someone from the office joins us for dinner tonight? He's new and doesn't know anybody. You mind, sweetie? Please, Ray, not tonight. I'm in no frame of mind. I guess that's fine. What time? I'm not cleaned up. Instinctively, Carl combed the fingers of his right hand through his tousled dark hair as if she could see him in his funk. Not until about 8, I think. I should have time to get home and fix something by then. Okay if I tell him to come by about 8? Idle's on at 9. Remind her. Sounds like a plan, Ray. 8. Damn it, man. Speak. You're so sweet. I know you wanted to see your show. I'll make it up to you, baby. I sincerely doubt it. No problem, Ray. Any friend of yours. See you about 7, she said, and hung up. Carl returned the phone to the top of the printer. He tried to refocus on the spreadsheet before him on the computer monitor. It was no use. 3 months on the new job, and already he was sick of telecommuting. Tired constantly. He'd wondered recently whether he was sick or whether leaving the school world for that of business was indeed killing him. Either way, the last thing in the world he wanted this evening was to host some hotshot broker from Rachel's firm. He'd never leave before Idle, for sure. Why didn't you just say so? What the hell, he muttered. It's just a couple of hours out of a lifetime. Carl wandered into the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of warm, flat Coke from a 2-liter container on the island. He downed the soda in several swallows, rubbing his left thumb absently against an orange juice stain on the counter. He walked into the living room where the television was still on from his lunch date with Matlock 5 hours ago. He stretched out on the sofa nearest the television, aware of his lethargy, annoyed by the phone call, and swiftly fell asleep. A sound, abrupt, like a thud or whack, awakened him. He groggily wiped dried drool from the left corner of his mouth, rose slowly, and looked around him. Much of the light had gone from the room, and though the vertical blinds were drawn over the sliding glass door leading to the balcony, he could tell that evening was falling fast. He entered the kitchen and glanced at the range clock. 6:46. Jesus. Just enough time before Rachel gets. The rap at the door was heavy, assertive. Carl vaguely wondered whether a knock was what awoke him in the first place. He bent down in front of the range door and used his reflection to smooth his hair and tuck his wrinkled white button down into his jeans. Maybe she's got groceries. Door's not even locked. Carl cleared his throat and strolled slowly toward the door. The knock came again, almost obnoxious in its insistence. Coming, he said, hoping that the knocker, especially if it was Rachel, would detect the disapproval in his tone. Carl opened the bluish-gray metal door. Before him stood a well-groomed man of about 35, his sandy blonde hair slicked back in a style which reminded Carl of Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street. The man wore an unnecessary tan trench coat, unbuttoned over a dark blue pinstriped suit. Yes? Carl asked, a bit uncomfortable when the man's casual stance, hands in pockets, slouching to the right, eyes on Carl's. I believe I'm early. You mind? Oh, you must be Rachel's guest. The man straightened and removed his hands from his pockets. I suppose I am. May I come in? Or shall we plan to dine in the hallway? Sure. Please come in. Carl stepped aside and the guest strode confidently past him, removing his trench coat as he walked. He was several inches over 6 feet, like Carl, but considerably less filled out. Lithe, like a tennis player. Carl guessed that they were about the same age, but this fellow was dramatically more fit. 5 years earlier, Carl reflected, and that certainly would not have been true. He'd become sedentary since he and Rachel had gotten married 2 years ago, but he had resolved just a couple of weeks ago to begin working out again, soon. The guest held the trench coat out toward Carl as if expecting Carl to put it away. Carl, irritated by the suggestion of superiority, made a suggestion of his own. Oh, just throw it anywhere. We haven't fixed the place up much yet. Any old chair will do. Okie doke, the man replied, and dumped the coat on the dining table. You know, we might be using that for dinner. The guest stuck out his hand, smiling smugly. Your wife didn't give me your name. She didn't? Oh, it's Carl. Carl shook the man's hand and was immediately turned off by the guest's dead fish handshake, the kind that sometimes made Carl think a man might be a tad light in the loafer. But something about this man seemed as straight as James Bond. Insincere. That's what that handshake says. Hi, Carl. Can a man buy a drink around here? The man stepped into the living room and sank into Carl's red leather chair. I didn't catch your name, Carl offered. You're over an hour early. Carl forced a smile. And you know damn well, a red leather chair is never for a guest. Never. The guest shifted comfortably in the chair and placed his wing-tipped feet on the red leather ottoman, crossing the left wingtip over the right. Smith, he said, examining his fingernails. Oh, come on. I see. What's your first name? The seated man responded with an incisive look in Carl's direction, followed by a return to scrutinizing his fingernails. John. He smiled and looked back up at Carl. John will have a screwdriver, Carl. She'll be home any minute. The screwdriver. You got it, John. Carl turned to go into the kitchen, but the guest's voice stopped him. Stoli, Carl, if you don't mind. We don't have Stoli. We have Smirnoff. Carl tried to make the words sound informative, but was irritated to hear them emerge defensive. He stood waiting for the guest's response and got it. Okay, big spender. That did it. Carl crossed to the sofa between the guest and the front hall and sat heavily. He tried to stare at the man called John, but looked away when the guest regarded him with an amused look. Look, John, Carl said quietly, looking at the mauve carpet. I don't know you, but this is my apartment. You're sitting in my chair. You're over an hour early for dinner. You're my wife's guest, not mine. So please, I don't know where you come off being so rude, but I ask you, please, don't try my patience. Carl risked a glance at the guest. The man's eyes clouded briefly, but the quick return of the confident expression forced Carl's eyes back to the floor. This is your landlord's apartment, Carl. He's just letting you pay to borrow it for a while. By the way, are you going to make yourself presentable for dinner? You unemployed or something? Need a couple of bucks? Did he hear a word I said? How could Rachel invite a man like this to our new home? I guess I want to know why you're so early. The guest reversed wingtips on the ottoman. Carl, I'm a successful stockbroker. I know how to pick them, the winners and the losers. I believe in being direct, and I believe that some people have got it and some people haven't. He re-examined his fingernails. You, most assuredly, haven't got it, Carl. Carl had had two bosses speak to him this way in the 2 years since he'd left the teaching profession in search of more money. He'd allowed them both to get away with it. Not this time. Get out of my house, he whispered, staring at a single fuzzy strand of carpet next to his bare right foot. I thought you wanted to know why I'm early, Carl. The strand appeared to be moving, ever so slightly. No, I want you to leave. I'm early because I wanted you to know that I plan to acquire your wife. You plan to? Certainly. You see, Carl, I know how to pick them. She's a winner. You're not. Simple math. It's not adding up to 2, big fellow. Get out of my home before I, the guest laughed heartily. Before you throw a box of Frosted Flakes at me, Carl. Get real. You're nothing. At least, that's what your wife says. Man, you should hear her talk about it. About how much it sucks to be out there involved with life while you watch I Dream of Jeannie and Matlock and feed and feel up your computer every day. And so soon after you've moved into this drab little apartment. Carl leaped to his feet. I have a job, an important job. The guest remained comfortable in the red leather chair. Sit down, Carl. Carl wavered, caught, as he so often was these days, between what he wanted to do and what he would do. He returned to his seat. Carl, you've been married, what, 2 years? Your wife tells me you're lousy in bed, have no ambition. And she married you because she thought she'd never meet a man like me. Biological clock and all that crap. Most women I've known are in the same boat as your wife, except they married to gain access to resources, big fella. Resources for them and their kids. So they stay with their husbands and play happy house for their friends and their alumni magazines, but not your wife. She didn't marry you for resources, Carl. So you're smack out of luck. You don't have access to offer your wife, Carl, or ambition, or energy, or passion. So you can give her to me. Carl summoned the courage he thought he needed to defend himself. If I had a gun, I swear I'd kill you, he breathed. If you had a gun, I swear you'd stick the barrel in your mouth. An ache spread in Carl's throat, and he fought the tears that would embarrass him in front of this monster. Rachel would never say those things, he rasped. Never. She would, and she did. Just this morning, as a matter of fact. How about that fancy screwdriver, big fellow? She'll be here any minute now. We'll ask her. She knows my new job has possibilities. And I don't watch television all day. And we love each other a lot. So you're not so smart. If you don't leave now, I'll have you arrested. Mind telling me what law I'm breaking, big fellow? Where is she? Why did she let him come here ahead of her? She must have gotten tied down at work, unless. The guest rose and crossed the living room to the balcony door. He opened the vertical blinds to reveal the last shades of dusky gray, gasping for air as night pressed its weight down upon the day. Carl, the reason I'll succeed in acquiring your wife, the man said as he turned from the glass doors, is that I am in possession of something that is not exactly one of your assets. Please, I don't want to hear your passion, big fella. That's what she'll see in me that she doesn't see in you. Passion for all that interests me. I don't live my life through a computer screen, Carl. I don't entertain myself or others with a television set. I possess both. They don't possess me. And I will possess your wife because I have the resource to which she wants access. She's better than all the other women I've known, Carl, because the resource she wants from a man is passion. The guest took a step toward Carl. Passion for all that interests me, Carl. I don't hide anything. I think you see that already. And it's why you already know you will lose her to me. The guest's face was inches from Carl's. Now get me that screwdriver before I passionately beat you to a pathetic pulp. Carl, tears streaming down his cheeks, the churns of self-pity alive in his gut, turned and retreated toward the kitchen. She would be here soon. As he opened the cabinet which housed the liquor, he looked out toward the living room. His eye was drawn by movement, past the furniture, past the visitor who rocked cockily on his feet with his hands in his pockets. The movement was, from this distance, a mangle of colors that changed every second or two, seemingly for no reason at all. As his right hand closed on the bottle of vodka, his wet eyes focused more clearly on the constantly shifting images coming from the far corner of the living room. The more the images shifted, the more the churning in Carl's gut turned to rage. He had never turned off the television set. Suddenly, the ludicrousness of his life pointed a forefinger at him. It poked him in the chest like a bully in a schoolyard. Carl set his jaw. He examined the bottle in his hand. The rage climbed out of his gut and into his arms and legs as he rushed madly toward the guest, charged past him, surprised him with his decisiveness, and smashed the vodka bottle into the television screen, obliterating the blather of a news show into countless pieces of dark glass. Turning, he faced John Smith. Drool ran from the left corner of Carl's mouth, but he did not care. Smith focused on the drool and put his hands up in self-defense. Carl advanced toward the guest, the reek of vodka filling the room, his right hand holding high the shattered bottle. He would kill this man, just as he'd killed the television set and the morons who lived in it. He would end this man who had come into his home and been so insightful. Carl stopped. He saw the fear in the man's eyes, but saw something else, something which didn't fit. It was pleasure, but no longer mocking or cocky, just pleased, frightened, and pleased. Get out of my home now. There's no supper for you here. The guest wasted no time in retrieving his trench coat from the dining table. As he put the coat on and advanced toward the front door, the guest turned and faced Carl. I'll find my supper somewhere else, big fellow. And the guest exited quietly. Carl, exhilarated and strangely clear-headed, returned to the kitchen and carefully laid the bottle remnant on the counter next to the microwave. His heart raced as he returned to the living room and sat confidently in his red leather chair. As he cooled off in the silence, he remembered fondly the first months with Rachel, nearly 3 years ago, the year before the wedding, the year before the career change, the constant, gorgeous music, the slow dances before bed, touch football Sunday mornings in the park with strangers and friends alike, weekend drives to the beach where they played putt-putt at low tide, digging holes with their hands for a 9-hole course. They had passed books between each other, classics, thrillers, spy novels, short stories, poetry, and always the music. They had made love to Santana's Europa and Stan Getz's Keep Me in Your Heart, seldom forgetting Pat Metheny's The Truth Will Always Be. Each time was exquisitely unlike any other, as they celebrated the passing of a day that had never happened before and the coming of one the world had never seen. Carl wondered where it had gone. He didn't think, now, sitting here amid the piercing scent of vodka, that any of it had ever gotten old. That first year together, he'd leapt out of bed each morning, the spring staying in his step all day as he taught his classes with a verve which enlivened even the most reticent students. As he remembered, he thought back to when he had taught Richter's The Light in the Forest. Strange that only now did he recall the line from the slave character, Bejance, about any man being a slave if he pulls burdens which mean nothing to the soul inside of him. And he had missed her each day in the best of ways, the kind that says, I get to see her again. He rose from the red leather chair and sank back into the sofa nearest the deceased television set. She liked to sit here, to read here. She still did, while he sat toad-like in front of his computer terminal down the hall in the den, visiting inane websites and other substitutes for real living. When did it begin? He pressed his face against the back cushion, trying to catch her scent, but the vodka's smell was more powerful and more recent. He tried and tried and tried, deep heaving sniffs of air against the cushion, but he just couldn't quite catch it. Not right here, but he would if I haven't lost her. A sound, abrupt, like a thud or whack, awakened him. He groggily wiped dried drool from the left corner of his mouth, rose slowly, and looked around him. Much of the light had gone from the room, and though the vertical blinds were drawn over the sliding glass door leading to the balcony, he could tell that evening was falling fast. He entered the kitchen and glanced at the range clock. 6:46. Jesus, just enough time before. Wait a minute. He could smell her. She was at the door. He was sure of it. Thrilled, he hurried into the living room and turned off the television set, glancing with disdain as he did so at the two nitwits pontificating on some useless, idiotic subject that had nothing whatever to do with him. He ran to the front door and flung it open. And there she stood, groceries in both arms. What a beautiful woman she is. What a beautiful woman you are, he blurted, and took the groceries from his puzzled wife, who followed him into the kitchen. Sweetie, she said, as he set the bags down and kissed her. Are you all right? Of course I'm all right. I'll pick the music tonight if you don't mind. The music? Why, that's fine. But I thought you wanted to watch Idol. It's Wednesday. You don't like to miss the elimination show. Not me. I'll go take a quick shower. Join me? She looked around her as if she expected someone to jump out and end the joke. Really? She said, a smile growing. Really, in case your friend is early. She slapped her right palm against her forehead as if she'd forgotten something. Oh my God, Carl. I'm so sorry. I forgot to call you. What? What is it, Ray? Frank got called away by a client about an hour ago. She took a playful step forward and began unbuttoning Carl's shirt. Is that so? Carl asked as he cupped her hands lightly while they did their deft work. That's so, big fellow, she said, kissing his chest as she pulled the shirt away. He asked for a rain check, said he'll find his supper somewhere else. Carl laughed softly at the man's obvious inability to separate the good things in life from the mundane. He scooped his wife into the air and down the hall, wondering on the way whether perhaps they shouldn't step out to Geordie's later for Stoley screwdrivers and some swing. That's it.
That is brilliant. I think I need a moment.
What's that?
I need a moment. I need a moment to recover. It's you know what I love like so much about hearing you read things. Just in general. Part of it's the content, right? It's such a beautiful story. Right? You start off with this guy that's I mean, and that was before the pandemic. Right. I mean, that's and it's I started working from home before the pandemic, even it's funny because I joke, right? And it's partially joke, it's partially true. No one ever knows when I'm working. Like, they think I only work if I'm on, like, if we're on like this, right? I'm on a meeting, other people are here, I'm working.
Right.
But when you're writing, right, 99% not this. When I'm at work, live work, right? There's things that are happening, but when those things are silent, right, you sit and write, it doesn't seem like you're working. It seems like you're sitting there, like, and
right.
And I'm not one of these writers that gets distracted. I don't have like, I don't, oh, I'm suddenly
Same
on
here.
some, yeah, I'm like on some Google like thing. If I Google something, it's for my writing. I figure out what that thing is and I move on. And I'm going.
Right.
Um, but you can really appreciate with his plight there. And I think so many people can now, especially after I don't know that the pandemic's over, but especially after the pandemic started, like after we've gotten to where we are, is you really can lose yourself in it.
Yeah.
That you're at home and that you don't have that differentiation between work and this is play and this is this.
Right.
And then you lose that differentiation between this is work and this is the people I love, this is my family, this is my wife, this
Right.
is what I do. And I think that story might be more powerful now, even than when you first wrote it,
Yeah.
considering everything that's happened.
Yeah. That, it's interesting. I gave a reading of that story in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And a woman came into the store before the actual reading. And then when I said, I'm going to read the story called The Guest, and at the time, this was before I had my collection. And The Guest was in Short Story America Volume 1. It was in the first volume.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm going to read a story from Volume 1 of Short Story America, the new book, which was what I was on tour for. And it's called The Guest. Well, this woman had a copy of the book with her. And she said, oh my God, that's my favorite story.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, wow, that's great. I mean, wow, your favorite story in the book? She said, no, that's my favorite story. I said, your favorite story, like favorite story you've ever read?
Right.
No.
Period. Right. Well.
She said it saved my marriage. And I was slack-jawed. I was stunned. But she said that her husband wasn't a big reader, but she had him read the story, and she said why she had him read the story. And what was implied was a certain doldrums in
Sure.
their lives together.
Right.
And she said it changed him. I couldn't believe it. I wrote that story before I was married. It was a story that I wrote for my thesis for my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
I was a single guy. I had almost gotten married to a girl I'd been with for a long time and didn't marry. That girl is unnamed in a story of mine called The Errand. You may remember that from the same collection. She's only known by pronouns she and her in that story, but the character in that story, the main character is in a situation involving an engagement, a fiance, um, and the reader may or may not want him to actually marry this woman. Um, um, I had been through that, but I had never been married. And I told her, I said, the woman at this bookstore, I said, I wrote this story before I was married, before I was engaged, before I met my wife. I was married at the time that she was in the bookstore, but not when I originally wrote the story. The story was
Sure.
originally published in a magazine called Pine Straw Magazine in North Carolina, based in Pinehurst and Southern Pines. And I said, I wrote this story really as a warning to myself for when I would be married.
Right. That's beautiful.
With the idea that maybe we can warn ourselves,
Right.
as Carl really does in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Has a dream, it's his own alter ego, it's his own opposite,
Sure.
who is better than him in some ways. Remarkably rude and aggressive, but in some ways is the side that he's left behind.
Right.
And as a storyteller, you never want to just say that, but it's the only story I've ever written that involves a dream sequence,
Mm-hmm.
um, when his wife knocks at the door, he doesn't directly remember the dream. Like many nap
Mm-hmm.
dreams that we have nap dreams on a couch,
Sure.
and we're like,
Right.
oh, I want to remember that, and then we can't remember that,
Mm-hmm.
but the subconscious in him does remember that, and it was, I wrote a story where I was like, the day is going to come in your life when you should remember what you used to be like, because that's going to be the
Right.
case someday, and you need to bring what you used to be like back in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. We do that all the time, right? It's you bring something, and we forget it about each other, right? But it's like you bring something unique and special to a relationship,
Yeah,
and then each party, but at some point you do start to forget it. Like you can get into the doldrums, you can get into feeling sorry for yourself, or you can sometimes about the other person. Like, and I try to catch myself, because and I'll say this, I don't know that my wife will even watch these shows, because she's has important things to do, and she may not, and God bless her, because she does far
mine,
more important things than
mine
I
too.
do.
She may never watch this, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. And I try to remind myself, don't forget how amazing she is, but then don't forget how amazing you are.
Right.
Like, don't forget that you're a person. Like, be that person. Like, she fell in love. Like, feel bad for yourself all you want. Like, yada yada. Like,
Yeah.
especially as artists, right? We have our little things, but just as a person, don't forget who you are. Like,
Yeah.
you fell in love with that person, right? Or he fell, like vice versa, right? Like, however it might be, just
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point.
remember who you are, because that's beautiful too.
Yep.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about that story is he's also remembering who he is,
Yes.
and that's helping her like get there. And
Yeah.
that's brilliant. That's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure. I always have fun with that story. I always interpret it a little bit differently each time.
Sure.
The dialogue's important in that story. I do some of the dialogue delivery from both characters in different ways from reading to reading.
Sure.
Um, Especially when the guest is talking, when there is an audience, and that's not how this works. My audience is in the little camera thing up there.
Right.
Uh,
Much different.
so that's why I'm making eye contact with when the guest says something particularly jarring or rude.
Right.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in an audience like in a bookstore or wherever, with that story particularly, I like to pick someone,
Right.
and when he says things like, "If you had a gun, I swear you'd put the barrel in your mouth."
Mm-hmm.
I,
That is a moment in that
I like to
story. Like,
pick
when you
one.
say that, you're just like,
I like to pick one person when I do that, and they
right.
shriek, and the other people are like, "I'm glad he's not looking at me right now,"
I'm sure.
because
Right.
it is such an attack, but it's an attack that involves truth, and Carl
Right.
knows it. Carl
Right.
knows Carl's in trouble,
Sure.
and this guy, that he invents, his own subconscious created this guy, but as a
Mm-hmm.
warning to himself, he literally delivers this guy to his house
Right.
during his nap to say, you got to get back with the program,
Right.
or you're in really big trouble, you know
Mm-hmm.
and nobody else is going to do it
Mm-hmm.
for him. Who's going to do it? His
Right.
boss, you know his friend that he has a beer with. He's not going to share enough with that person for them to even tell him something like that. you know
Sure.
if you had a gun, I swear you'd stick the barrel in your mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Wake
And
up.
yeah, that is such a moment. And you know what I love? This past year, so what, 2022 Short Story America, I did the the talk about ambiguity in fiction.
Yes, loved it.
And
Loved it.
yeah, thank you. And one of the things that I talked about, and because I thought about this so much going into that, was you need to trust that your audience may like it, even if they don't get the exact thing. And
Right.
I think you can love that story
Yes.
and think that he's there, and
Yeah.
not realize it's an alter ego or anything else, and
Yeah.
just think he showed up and this is just some asshole that it's there.
Right.
And you can love that just as much, like,
Yeah.
and get as much out of it.
Again, if he forces that guy to get the hell out of the apartment and give up his plan to acquire his wife, that also works.
Right.
What you're saying is that
Yeah.
that also works. If he just said, you know what, I got to make a comeback, and doing that means driving this asshole out of my apartment.
Right. Yeah.
You can make that work.
You can love it either way, and that's what's beautiful about it. And that's why I wanted to give that talk when we were talking about it, was that it's those moments. It's like, no, you don't always, like, everyone, you don't have to think everyone's going to understand everything 100% all the time.
Yeah.
Because you know what, the flip might actually be just as beautiful in its own way. Like, just trust people to have a response.
That's true. I mean, yeah, the number of times in 12 years or so that people have surprised me about Friday Afternoon, the story Friday Afternoon. And I know you have audience members who haven't read that story, so I'll try not to.
But should.
I'll try not to make this a spoiler. But who there have been people who say, is he in hell? Is that where he is? Did he die on the? Did he die? Did he run into that chicken truck? Is he dead?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there are people who think this kid's gonna maybe take him to his car, and I'll be like, part of me that's like, well, no, that's not how I see it. But it's not my story anymore. Once you've read it, it's not my story anymore. Now it's yours to interpret the way you want. And there's a reason why I don't just say, here's where he is. Because there is that ambiguity there,
Right.
That, yeah, I mean, physically, yeah, he could be right there in the dark.
Right.
Could, yeah, I mean, your talk was so good. That was such a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, that's beautiful. So now that we've got into your writing, do you have a guiding light as a writer? Maybe it changes per story, or just.
I mean, when it really, going back to when I first fell in love with short fiction, I like eclectic short fiction.
True.
I'm not big into the linked collections. I'm not big into short stories that all in a whole book all happen in the same town. I know that is somewhat in vogue now.
Very popular nowadays. Man.
Very popular right now. But my two collections are entirely eclectic, just because I like non-episodic short fiction. It's one reason I love the original Twilight Zone so much, is it's non-episodic. Every single one is its own very distinct standalone story.
Right.
And so that's my approach to writing stories. That just comes naturally. It's not a conscious decision that I want everything to be different from other things I've done. It's just what I'm attracted to. Okay, now I'm going to do something. Now I don't sit down and go, I'm going to write something entirely different from anything I've ever written. That's not what I set out to do. It's what I end up doing. but it's not what I set out to do.
Sure.
What I set out to do is there a situation I want to explore that is really more come to me rather than something I've brainstormed. It's usually something that's come to me, and where I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I'll create a situation, drop the reader into the situation, and then write the story to find out what happens. As I said at Short Story America, I'm not an outliner. I don't plan stories out. I don't plan my novels out. I don't plan short stories out. That's me. That works for me. I don't advise people do it my way. It's just I'm not an outliner. I wasn't even an outliner when professors in college and my English major would say, write your outline and then write your essay.
Right.
I'd write
Give
my
me your
essay.
outline and then do your essay.
I had my outline. It's in my head, and I'm going to go, where it takes me. And I really do that with fiction. You have to be disciplined about remembering what's happened and keeping things, on a forward march. You have to be organized, but I like for everything I consume as a reader or as a viewer, for things to be pretty non-episodic,
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I think about that too. There's been sometimes people describe it as someone that's an architect versus someone that's a gardener. I tend to think of a third, and I think of myself this way as more like a sculptor. It's yeah, you can garden something and it grows and you just follow it. And that I do that to a degree. But there's a bit that you start to shape it. Right. And it's like a bonsai tree almost, like versus sculptor, but you start to trim it around, and I'm not an architect either. Not to poo-poo that at all. Like it's successful,
but you're
billions of people have had successful.
But you're a builder.
Right. You build, yeah, for sure. But
I do see it as being a little different from the garden metaphor, because what's going to grow there is going to grow there, whether you're there or not. You can tend it and you can water it, but I see it more. I really liked when I gave the Hemingway quote at Short Story America, that it's architecture, not interior decoration. When it comes to writing a story, it's architecture, not interior decoration. And you that design, and build is yours. And and part of what he was saying was, I don't want to put a tremendous amount of effort into gratuitous description, essentially, what I once blurted out to a workshop that I gave. I said, I think that sometimes good writers can venture into a bit of self-pleasure when it comes to description.
Yep, for sure.
Essentially descriptive masturbation.
I
hate to use a crass term like that, but really, sometimes that's what you encounter, even from the best writers. Sometimes reading Pat Conroy, something that will frustrate me is excessive, obsessive attention to description that isn't needed for that scene. And I know that sounds like a criticism of Pat Conroy, who left me behind, forever ago. But you got to know what you think is good about you as a writer.
For sure.
And I do not like gratuitous over description for no particular reason. I think that's what Hemingway was saying when he said the story is architecture, not interior decoration.
No, I think you're right, because
you're building.
I've thought about that a lot. And I don't think, as far as Pat Conroy goes, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, right?
No,
There's
no,
different strokes, right? Like there's
absolutely
different
right.
things. Like
Absolutely.
absolutely
Yeah.
fine. I am terribly moved by Hemingway. I've definitely been affected by him. A Fair Weather to Arms, a lot of those like classical ones affected me in very sincere ways.
Yeah.
Um, but I can also look back at it and go, but there's things I would do differently. Um, and that doesn't mean that they're wrong necessarily. It means that, yeah, hell yeah. And that's what's awesome about art. And that's what's awesome about
Yes.
writing is,
Yes.
hell yeah, there's a lot of different ways we
Trust
can do this.
yourself as an artist.
Right.
Trust yourself as an artist.
Trust
Who
yourself. Yeah.
says that guy or that woman was better than you for the story you're writing right now? For the
Right.
story you're writing right now, do not give them that kind of credit.
Right.
Trust your art.
Yeah.
I believe that 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of
Amen.
a lot of people have liked Friday Afternoon, and one thing that I remind myself about with that story is I am not convinced that any writer that I admire could have written that story better than I did. And
Right.
that is not a boast. It is simply the confidence that you have to have. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
write something worth reading, you better believe in yourself.
Hell yeah. That
Better
means you
believe.
wrote the story you should.
Right.
And I think about that all the time. Like
Because that story
I
didn't exist in the world without you.
right. And it's if you think about it, like I always I thought about a lot, like over the last few years, right? Like my goal as a writer was vague when I was younger, but it was always I wanted to be great at this.
Yes.
And I didn't know what that meant. I like when I was younger, I don't know what that means. I just knew like you could Hemingway, you can like start naming names, but what does it mean to you, right?
Right.
And that's it. When you and I've done different things, but in a nutshell, are you writing the things only you can write? And it's if they only existed because of you, you only got there, right? And I fully believe all writing's an evolution, right? It's not, oh, this is this brand new thing, no one's ever seen it. No one has a palate for it, right? It's just like food, right? Like, oh, guys, this new thing, no one's ever tasted it. No one's gonna like it because they don't have a palate for it yet.
Yeah.
Everything's an evolution, but does that dish only exist because of you?
Because of you. I love
That's
it.
greatness to me. And that's what I strive for. I only want to produce dishes that I have.
Whom did Van Gogh copy? Nobody.
Yeah.
Van Gogh, I don't think he copied anybody.
Sure.
His work is his work, you
Right.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
I mean, I don't know when each writer lived and all that, but Van Gogh wasn't trying to be anybody else but Van
Right.
Gogh.
Right.
And with no guarantee that he'd ever be rich, he
Sure.
wasn't, never be famous, just
Right.
I am going to create art that no matter how well or crappy my life goes, that I'm going to leave behind. This is
Right.
what I'm going to leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I feel right now at this stage of my writing is if somebody were to cross the double yellow tomorrow and
Right.
wipe me out, or I die of a
Mm-hmm.
massive heart attack or
Right.
stroke
It's
tomorrow,
those fucking
am I
drivers we talked
proud?
about.
Am I proud of what I'm leaving behind? Even if there's only a matter of low thousands of people that have ever read my work. Might they someday, because I'm leaving it behind and I
Right.
believe in it. And I think that every writer needs to, I've learned to think that way.
Sure.
When I was studying Fitzgerald in college, I was like, God,
Right.
I would love to be a great short story writer like this guy someday. And I didn't write my first short story until I was in my late 30s,
Right.
But when I was 21, I was like, I'd love to be a great short story writer like F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'd love it. I'd love to write stories like him. But you know what? I've ended up writing stories like Tim Johnston.
You have,
and,
and that's even more important.
and I'm happy about that. I am happy about that, no matter whatever happens with it. And one of the advantages of having been in the corporate world in my 20s is I discovered I didn't like it. I didn't like working for Procter and Gamble and then for First Union National Bank. I didn't like it, but I learned a lot, about what I didn't like and what I didn't approve of, that's found its way into some of my work, but I also discovered over time what I did like. I love teaching. I love coaching basketball, and I love reading, and I loved writing. I knew eventually I would write. I just didn't write maybe until I'd gathered a little bit of wisdom that would make me qualified to do some of it,
Sure.
But
you're better than me. I wrote way before I had the wisdom. I wish I'd started writing when I had the wisdom for it.
I think if I had started writing in my 20s, not only would it have not been worth a hill of beans, I wouldn't be doing it now, because I think I would have convinced myself in my 20s that I wasn't up to it, because I wasn't up to it. I wasn't up to it. This might be why I didn't try to do it in my 20s. I wasn't up to it, but for 20 years now, I have been up to it. And I know I've been up to it. And I wouldn't even care what anybody else said. You know what I mean?
As you should.
I know I'm up to it. And that doesn't mean you ever get lucky, with your work. You don't. Universal has optioned my first novel, the first piece of long fiction that I've written. I will tell you this right now. I did not write my first novel thinking that it would even remotely possibly be optioned for film and TV rights.
Right.
And I don't think you should write with that as your goal. At least not me. I shouldn't write with that as my goal, because I don't think I'm going to do something that's very good if that is the actual goal. I need to please myself as a reader. I have to please myself.
Right.
And anything else that happens, fine.
Well, and I don't think you get. You may write something to sell and sell it,
and people specifically for that.
People do
God
that. God bless them. I don't want to.
Yeah. There's no putting
that as a possibility.
That's right.
But it's a very sad way to go about it. Right?
Yes.
Like, so when you write something that you believe in, that's meaningful to you, and then it sells, that's when you get that great feeling, right? Like
yes.
That's being an artist, right? You can what I worry, right? And you see it so much with modern media in general, it feels like fan fiction. Right, you go watch, like my son loves Marvel. We started watching all the Marvel stuff because he was into it, and our kids got into it. We've enjoyed a lot of it. So much now just feels like fan fiction. I'm just like, it's literally, and not that there's something wrong with that per se, but there is something lacking, right? Like, I could go write Iron Man, but it's just Iron Man. Like, you're not adding a lot to the world.
It feels factory made.
Right, exactly. And so I'm with you. I think it's really beautiful how you went about doing it, and I hope you keep doing it that way.
That's the only way I can do it. I mean, if I know what I like as a consumer of entertainment, and literature, and movies, and etc. And so I think if anybody in your audience is starting to write or is emerging or any of those things, and I think the advice there is write what pleases you, and forget anybody else says. But be honest with yourself. When you come back and read something you wrote, if it doesn't please you, you have to be honest with yourself. You can't say,
Yep.
oh, I put so much work into it, and even though I don't really like it as a reader, I
Mm,
gotta send it somewhere anyway. No, don't
no,
send don't send
no.
that anywhere.
Amen.
If it doesn't please you as a reader,
Right.
then don't submit it anywhere.
Right.
Fix
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I'm funny because we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I'm very out in the public area, right? The bar here, it's you head that way, it's the kitchen, right? So actually, as we've been talking, people have come out and getting water and everything else. There's the kitchen island, there's
Uh-huh.
the everything, right?
Just
Right there.
wide
You
open. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You head that way. It's our living room, and then you keep going, and that's all the bedrooms. And you go, and it's at all times, it's I need to like remember what's important, right? Like they're gonna go do that, right? It's if I'm not doing stuff that's here that's important to me,
Yeah.
and all of that chaos is going on, then every single time I'm gonna lose myself in the chaos.
Right.
And so what actually always reminds me is that occasionally people walk back and they go, "What are you laughing at?
Yeah.
What are you making that noise about?" It's because I'm writing, or like, and really writing's rewriting, right? Like it's usually like I'm editing, I'm doing stuff, and I start laughing at it. And when I laugh at my own stuff when I came back to it, and then someone notices and goes, "Dad, what are you doing?" That's
Yeah.
when I realized, like, okay, I've hit it. Like
Yeah.
that's actually exactly what I'm going for. Like they haven't
Yeah.
even read it. It's just
Right.
my response to this, and I've worked my ass off at this, and
Yeah.
I know I've actually gotten there.
Yeah.
Um, it is hard, but if you're gonna do it, you know, I try to encourage people all the time. Step away from I just need to make money. And just if you think of it like you're a hobbyist,
Yeah.
when you go play golf, then you don't feel like you need to make money playing golf every time. You can still love it. Like just do the thing you love and just be as great as you can. Just
Yes.
see where it takes you.
That's the way to live anyway.
All right. So it's last call here. So you don't have to leave, but no one's staying, lights like I guess you have to leave, but yeah, you can keep drinking, but you can't stay here. Um, I love to ask everyone that we bring on in general because I get to learn from all of it. What's a life hack? Like, what's your superpower? Like, how do you write all these great things, get through the day? Like, what's, I guess maybe that's two questions, but what's the superpower? What's the life hack? But what's one thing our audience can take away from this conversation and like implement and immediately make their life better?
Wow. That last part makes it really hard. Um, um, I think being able to step into other people's lives. I don't know if that connects with your question very well, but
Sure.
um, I've always been able to imagine other people's situations. Um, I don't mean that in some kind of golden rule kind of way. I just mean, I think going back to being a kid, I could see somebody and picture accurately or inaccurately what their situation is. That seems to help me as a writer, um, um, whether it comes to point of view or whether it comes to dialogue. Um, uh, I, I I like to step into another soul in my own mind, um, and sometimes that's just at the grocery store, talking to the cashier as I'm checking out some groceries, and you end up in a conversation,
Sure.
and I will picture their lives. what's this person's, does this person go home to another person, or they go home alone? What's it like to be this person? All of that doesn't, I don't deliberately do that, but it happens.
Sure.
Um, and including happens around people I don't like.
Sure.
So I'm able to write antagonists pretty well, uh, because I will read into people's lives, wrongly or rightly, things that I imagine might be the case.
Sure.
I have no idea whether that connects with your question at all.
No,
But
no, I think it's really beautiful, actually.
going back to childhood, I found I should have written way earlier in life, and I didn't do it. I was attracted to it, the idea. I was a very avid reader as a kid. You know, this is before smartphones, before computers. Kids now,
Right.
they do have a very good excuse for not being big readers
Mhm.
when they're 12. I was a big reader when I was 12, but one reason was that one thing that was always there and available was boredom. You
Sure.
know, I mean,
Right.
that's why we played outside so much. Boredom.
Right.
I mean, it was boring. If you didn't do
Mhm.
anything, it was boring. What
Right.
could you do? There wasn't a phone sitting there to surf the net, or a computer
Well,
or anything
yeah,
else.
having gone through a lot of kids now that, so what, my oldest daughter is 23. And then our son, I mean, we have the grandkids now. They're just as bored.
Yeah,
Smartphone hasn't cured boredom.
it's a
We
different
find the same
kind.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different kind, but I think it's more limiting. Um, I
Right.
think kids don't find themselves filling time by reading, except what they read on their phone. Uh,
Mhm.
I know that sounds like, oh, the the old guy saying my day
Sure.
was better. It wasn't better, but I became a lifelong reader,
Right.
in middle school, and read beyond my years. I was always looking for good new stuff to read, um,
Right.
and I've just been sort of rewarded for that recently, more than anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think about that a lot in the sense that you get that empathy. I think when you read a story, because
yeah,
you have to now imagine yourself, even if it's first person, third person, whatever it is, you're now projecting that person. And the author can be telling you, I did this, I did that,
yeah,
but you're projecting when you read it. And it's
yeah.
still something magical. I don't think
It
it's gonna
is.
go away. I just, even with the kids, like, our 16-year-old loves, like, she has books all day. She actually has book pages that she pasted in the room.
Yeah,
Because I think it teaches you something. I think that empathy, everything else, is beautiful. I think that's a beautiful way to learn it.
it is. It is.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and we're gonna post this on YouTube. YouTube's great. All those things are great.
I love you too. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not, and I do too. I listen to things all the time, but it's not the
yeah,
same. Like they don't replace each other. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's what I hope, and that's what you see happening, right? They were like, print books are dead, and then it's all going to be ebooks, and it's all plateaued, and it's kind of become its thing, and I think that'll continue to happen. But I hope, you know, authors like the rest, the other people we have on the shows, I hope we can continue to get people to read and things, because it's, for one, listening is beautiful. That's why I wanted to have, readings on this show, because it's just
yeah,
fantastic. I think people don't even realize what they've been missing, and I want to make sure we
yeah.
project that as much as we can. And
People are missing a ton. They really,
yeah,
People have no idea. Um, the people who are walking amongst them that are really great artists. I mean, one
Right.
thing, 7 volumes into Short Story America, um, and I'm not entirely sure there'll be another one. I mean, I'm doing more and more and more of my own writing.
Okay.
So when people say, "Well, when's going to be volume 8?" I'm like, I don't know, because they're, not, same thing with the conference. It's like, well,
Right.
there have been 6 conferences, but there's a reason they're not called annual, because
Right.
it's just, this was the 6th Short Story America conference, but not,
Right.
because I might not do another one.
Yeah.
But we I had a train of thought there, and I think I've lost it. What were we just on that triggered this thought in me?
Um, Empathy, going through reading stories, being important
Oh, what's lost? Yes.
with loss. Yeah.
People don't realize, uh, in this, for example, in the anthology series, there just aren't famous authors in there.
Right.
None of us
Yeah.
in the series, 200 and something of us, are famous,
Right.
but there are an awful lot of masters in there.
There is.
There are a lot of masters of this art form,
Yeah.
and very few people get to discover that. There's not some great marketing machine at Short Story America. It's a very small indie publisher, like many quality indie publishers that don't have
Mhm.
access to the market and can't force books into all the Barnes and Nobles and force the New York Times Book Review to,
Right.
Knopf can tell the New York Times Book Review what week they're going to review a particular book.
Right.
I mean, and
Mhm.
the bestseller is
Absolutely.
established before anybody's even read the book. It's like, well, it's going to go
Right.
out in this number of stores, and that makes it a bestseller the first week.
Right.
You don't even know whether it's any good.
Right.
I think so many really great artists don't get, and it's true in music. I mean, Lord
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
knows how many musical geniuses out there that
We've
are
missed.
living at the wrong time
Right.
in artistic history,
Sure.
that are just not going to be discovered. I mean, they can't get their music heard by the right people,
Right.
and so anything we can do, you and I, to have
Amplify that.
some
Right.
number of people discover quality art. That's what you're
Right.
doing. It's what I do with Short Story America. That's about the other writers. That's not about
Right.
me. I have my own stuff, but it's
Sure.
about look,
Right.
read the
Exactly.
book, you know.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then it
Absolutely.
sometimes feels a little quixotic. Are we tilting at windmills? You know, but you kind of had to admire
Well,
Don
yeah.
Quixote. It's like, but he believes in something. You know,
Right. Right.
there might be
Absolutely.
it's tilting at windmills. I know that there are people who just are, I remember in Beaufort when I started Short Story America, like people would be a little bit patronizing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's neat.
Right.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, short stories. Yeah, that's great. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't show up at a reading. They don't buy a book. Because they don't believe it's anything worth.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's something that just somehow has to change or come back. I don't know what really is the right term.
Sure. You gotta. It's hard, but we all have to keep beating. Beating down doors. I just, and that's part of the reason I wanted, to do this. Right. Like,
Yeah.
I hate social media. Right. Like, my wife jokes like, "Oh, you should go on Twitter. Oh, you should do this." I don't even care. I've given completely up on it because I don't care.
Yeah.
But I had this idea, and I'm like, you know what? I don't mind, having a drink, joking with people, right? Like YouTube, all these things, it's social media.
Yeah.
It's very different. And it's like, what I want to do is try to amplify
Yeah.
those voices. Like if I can get some of those stories out, and it's going to be a process, and I'm not expecting tomorrow things, oh my God, everyone, suddenly is a bestseller that comes on this show or anything like that. But if you can be one of the waves that pushes it forward, and that's all I'm hoping we do here is just be
Well,
one of the waves. Like,
you're going to build a library of these conversations.
right.
And I got to tell you, I must speak for other writers when I say this is great that you're doing this. I mean, whether it ends up, making an impression on hundreds of people or thousands, or one day hundreds of thousands, it is incredible that you're doing this, and you're doing it in this format. There's not a time limit. Clearly,
Right.
we've been going for 2.5 hours.
We've been going.
2.5
I put
hours.
a timer. I'm like, oh, you should keep it. I'm like, we're over.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think that writer after writer after writer is really going to appreciate this. Um, and I tip my hat to you. Um, I hope that writers drinking whiskey or Captain Morgan will end up with hundreds of episodes someday.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'll
We'll see
certainly
how it
help you
goes.
spread the word. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So anything else you want to leave us with before we call it a day?
Well, I don't know when you're going to plan to air it. There are things I'm not allowed to say yet about Universal. I'm allowed to say
Oh.
that Eric LaSalle is set to produce and direct. That much.
Okay.
No. If anybody wants to get signed copies of that novel or any of my other books, I mentioned it earlier, but they're on Amazon, or they can go to their bookstore, ask their bookstore to order it, whatever. But if they want signed copies, to go to tdjohnston.com. It's my shameless plug again. As Bill knows, we have to promote our own work.
Absolutely.
And we are idiots if we don't, because you better be your first
Right.
first good promoter
Right.
of your art. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be happy to sign and personalize for anybody that comes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we will. And my shameless plug again. So every episode of this, my whole goal is to introduce you to the next author you're going to love. Right. So if you love Tim, if you love TD Johnson, just support him. Right. Like I do this, like there's no, you can go to the website, you can go to my website and get this free. I'm going to do free, completely unabridged versions on there. Go to YouTube. None of it you're paying for. Just support the authors. Yeah. Right. That's the whole goal of this. I want you to find the next author you're going to love. And Tim is phenomenal. You're going to love him. And if not, try to find the next episode, try to find the next author, right? Like we're all different. So, Tim, thank you so much. This is an honor and a thrill. I'm so happy you came on with me today.
Well, I'm really honored and thrilled to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, so thank you so much. You have a great night. It actually turned from, I don't know if I have here. Look, I think I can show the window. When I was doing the drink earlier, there was light in that window where we've changed here on the West Coast. Well, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. Very good.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.